Wearing a mask should be mandatory in all states of Australia until the current climate has improved.
27 questions.
27 weeks.
27 pedestrians.
Should wearing a mask be mandatory in each state? I think no. Out here, we've got no cases of COVID. The nearest case to us is nearly 300 k's away. I think Victoria is a little bit different because everyone, like, it's such a big population in such a small state. So there is so much crossover and everyone is so close together. I think the bigger the state and the lower the population density, that's where we need to start being a little bit more thoughtful about how we manage it.
Even as a healthcare professional, wearing a mask out on the street has really huge impacts on your mental health. For a start, it's really claustrophobic. And at the moment, everyone is really anxious. Like I've noticed at work and even at the shopping center and stuff, everyone's a bit on edge. And having that mask on your face increases your anxiety because it's something that you're not used to. If you're in an environment where wearing a mask is not essential and you're able to keep your 1.5 meters apart, then you should. But I don't know, in some areas it's just unavoidable and it's actually the best practice.
At the current stage, yes. I think when it comes to wearing masks, it should be mandatory, but they should make it much more widely available. I shouldn't have to be relying on Facebook Marketplace or Instagram or buying 2 boxes for $50 off Chemist Warehouse. It should honestly be as widely available as those like reusable plastic bags are at the shops, if not more so. They should literally be everywhere. And I think once we get to that saturation point, then we can look at making them mandatory.
I think wearing a mask should be mandatory in all states and everywhere. Wearing a mask is not about not getting coronavirus at this current stage. It's about the fact that if you go outside and you're not someone who's been in lockdown for the past 60 years, you're potentially at risk. And there are people in the community who are extremely vulnerable and who need protection, who need help. And for you to audaciously go outside not wearing a mask when you can't even guarantee that you might not give your lovely 90-year-old grandma neighbor that you might not, you just can't guarantee that you won't give her coronavirus. So the fact that some people choose not to wear masks is shocking, shows that they have no understanding of what compassion or caring for other people looks like. And at the end of the day, if it actually helps you in whatever form to actually not get sick yourself as well as help others, what is stopping you from wearing a mask?
I'll say it once more for the people in the back. Wear a mask. Wear a mask. Just do it. It doesn't affect your life in any other way, except it might help stop the spread of COVID. So just wear one.
Yeah, I do think it should be made mandatory. I think it's in the best interest of everyone's health, but I do understand that there may be reasons some people actually can't have access to masks, either people with disabilities or people who are low socioeconomic who might not have access to these types of things, and I wouldn't want them reprimanded for not being able to do that.
I don't consider myself a health professional, so I don't look at it from that side of things. I just look at it as, if wearing a mask is going to allow me to go out, if wearing a mask is going to allow me to go and do the things I need to do, I have no problem putting one on personally. It's such an easy thing to put a mask on. It's not a hard thing to do. And if it's going to contribute positively, even if it's just for the look of it, so that people are wearing masks, we're going to open businesses up and the economy can start pumping a bit more. Fuck, just put a mask on. I don't think it's that hard.
In Australia, if it's required, then I'm fully behind it. It makes sense. And it's just prolonging this corona business if you're not, I think, prepared to give up a little bit of your own personal freedom for the collective. It just, I think, shows like a stunning narcissism.
I don't think it should be mandatory. Honestly, I think it's good, as a sort of psychological reminder as well. In Victoria, we've got it now, but at the start of it, people weren't socially distancing. So now everybody's got a mask on. It's just like a visual reminder that, oh, hang on, we are, pandemic, back up off me.
Well, I think that question comes from the rising numbers in Victoria and New South Wales. In Victoria and New South Wales, I think definitely in the metro areas and high cluster zones that people should definitely be required to wear masks. I myself always wear a mask when I'm going out in public, when I'm on a train, when I'm near a group of people where social distancing can't be adhered, just because I do care for other people's health and safety. And then I know my friends do come from families where someone might be a bit more vulnerable. So by being able to protect them, I help protect their family. And I think that should be a lesson that everyone takes out of this as well. Just think beyond yourself and what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I think it's funny because the fact that this is even a question is so interesting to me, because there is actual studies, so many studies on this that show the effects of respiratory illnesses, the transmission difference with masks and not wearing masks. And it is so clear that wearing masks makes a huge difference in the rate of transmission. So why wouldn't we be wearing masks if the amount of infection rates demanded that?
Yes, I think that wearing a mask could be mandatory in all states. We can see very clearly where Victoria has failed to do so. But I also think that on that note, we need to acknowledge that it is not just... It's putting a lot of pressure and making it an individual problem. It's saying that if you do not wear a mask, then you are at fault for corona in Australia. And I think that's taking away a lot of the pressure and the blame from the government, who have failed to act on it like when they should have acted. I think we saw what was happening in China. We saw as it was spreading through Asia and as it started to become a problem in America. And we had that brief time period where it wasn't as big of a problem and we could have prevented it. But the government failed to enact unemployment and just COVID leave quick enough. And they failed to enact laws and start making a move on social distancing. So it's just a lot of government failure here. But it's not just our responsibility. They need to also take responsibility for that. But if everybody starts wearing a mask, hopefully we're not going to be stuck in this for very much longer.
I think I had to start doing it more because I'd just be walking around the block and there's people wearing a mask. So I'd be feeling like a clown because they're wearing a mask and I'm not. What I would prefer is maybe it officially, masks being officially mandatory when you're in certain places, i.e. the supermarket or public transport, and then that being enforced. It can be a fashion thing as well. So some of you need to spice it up and try on a mask.
No, I don't think that wearing a mask should be mandatory in all states. Purely because in South Australia, everything's pretty much fine. We're pretty much back to normal day to day. We've got social distancing. We don't really need masks at the moment. All our cases are contained. So no, I don't think that all states' masks should be mandatory, but definitely in the states that have active cases and community transmissions.
I would say no, because if I don't have to wear one, I won't. Because it fogs my glasses up, and I don't like that.
I think, yeah, if one state has to do it, I think every state should have to do it. And it's the only way that I think that they reckon we're going to stop it, so it should be compulsory everywhere. But if it's not everywhere, then I don't think anyone should have to do it. It should be personal preference.
I think in Victoria, absolutely it should be. I think when you've got so much community transmission, the only reason you should be going out is for obviously the essential stuff. Looking elsewhere, I mean, cases in WA, obviously NTSA, have been pretty well under control. Likewise, Queensland, New South Wales, those East Coast states are sort of doing more or less okay as well. So I think mandating masks is probably a bit of a step too far.
So I actually feel underqualified to answer this question because how am I personally supposed to know? I think whatever works to help people be safe and happy and comfortable and stop the pandemic is what we should be doing. So if that means yes mask, then yes mask. If that means no mask, then no mask.
If you apply that logic, you're kind of telling people in the middle of the desert or farms where they don't see anyone for days, they need to wear a mask. So my kind of thinking around this is masks should be mandatory in supermarkets, on public transport, in high traffic areas, but day to day or driving around or in your apartment, no.
Well, I don't understand why people are getting so mad about it. If we had done mandatory masks and all that stuff and people stay at home to start with, then we wouldn't probably still be in the situation that we're in. And it's like, you wear a seatbelt, you follow, the traffic signs, just give a shit about someone else other than yourself, please. For fuck's sake.
I don't think it should be mandatory in all states because not all states have the same level of outbreak of coronavirus. That's not even in some states at the moment. But I definitely think when you're in an area that is like a hotspot or has had a few cases, or if you're shopping and you're close to people, you should wear a mask, because it's, if not for yourself, then for elderly people or for people who are higher risk. So yeah, just think about it as something that's not for you, but for helping someone else.
Generally speaking, I do think masks need to be worn across the country. It's just about the circumstances in which they shouldn't be. I think there are real legitimate reasons why masks shouldn't be worn, and being able to be really aware of the fact that those need to be respected. Like I work in disability, like there's a lot of need for people to not wear masks. It's a really obvious one. The hard of hearing community and the deaf community have obvious reasons to need to see people's facial expressions in their mouths. They need it for communication, for their communication needs. And so it's in those circumstances, I actually think that masks should not be worn if it's going to be done in a safe way, of course.
Honestly, no, because like if you're stupid enough to go and put yourself in a place where you're potentially at risk, and then you go and get yourself sick, I think that's on you anyway.
I think if there is like community transmission in a state, then yes, it should be mandatory. But like for Tasmania right now, where we have no community transmission, I don't think it's necessary. But as soon as there are cases in the community again, yes, I do think it should be mandatory to wear a mask.
In states where it is a hotspot, I definitely agree that it should be mandatory, simply because it does stop the spread of the virus. But somewhere like Queensland, it's just not needed. That being said, I do encourage people to wear them, obviously, especially if they're an at-risk person, or if they're feeling slightly unwell, or if you're feeling unwell, just don't go out at all.
Yeah, I think it should definitely be an individual choice. I think that people with like weakened immune systems and the elderly, it's their individual choice to not wear a mask, but obviously they're putting themselves at risk.
I would not say that wearing a mask should be mandatory in all states. I think that it is incredibly dependent on where you are, what the current climate is in regard to COVID-19, and whether or not there are community transmissions. Because if it's not a community transmission issue, and it's like Perth, where I live, where the only cases are people who've returned from out of the country or interstate, or it's people who have come in working on ships and stuff like that, do I think that it should be considered lethal or deadly or threatening? No, not necessarily. Do I think it can pose a threat? Yes. But do I think that a mask is mandatory? Like, would that be necessary in Perth? No, not at the moment.